Here on the channel, we're much more about skills and documenting fun trips than talking about gear. But let's be honest, gear is a necessary part of the whole backpacking experience. And also, it's just a whole ton of fun to get new stuff to play with. So with that, here's 6 new pieces of gear for summer 2024. So I'll level with you, this will probably seem like a pretty odd collection of gear, but I'm preparing for a trip that's going to cover a very broad range of conditions. I could be seeing daytime temps in the 90s all the way down to the 30s and 40s. Overnight temperatures might range from comfortable in the 60s and 70s all the way down to the low teens. Some days are going to be absolutely bone dry, whereas others I can expect nearly constant rain. Ground conditions, well, they'll range from sand to snowpack. So really there's just lots going on with planning this trip. Now to be clear, I'm not going to be carrying everything that I have all at once, and I'll be mailing things to myself and mailing things back along the way. And there might also just be some pieces of gear that I decide not to take at all, just because I checked the weather before I leave and it turns out that I don't need it. As you all probably know, I'm a really big Andrew Skirka fanboy, and one of the things that he talks about with trip planning is making sure to get all of the gear that you might possibly need ahead of time. That way that you have it, and if it turns out that you don't need it, no worries, you just don't have to take it with you. Besides, this is all stuff that I would use at a later date on a different trip if I end up not using it this time around. Also, I want to note that I have a ton more gear coming in, so keep an eye out for more videos like this, just because I really want to talk through all of the different gear that I'm purchasing at this point. And one last thing before we dive into the actual pieces of gear here, none of this is an endorsement or me saying that this is like the best gear ever or anything like that. I do, however, spend a ton of time researching gear before I get it, so I'm pretty confident that this gear is going to work for me, and I'm really excited about it. All right, up first on my list are my John G Transit Tech pants. I am not normally a pants guy. I very much prefer to be hiking in shorts whenever possible. I've got kind of a weird body shape, I guess. I don't know, I can just never find hiking pants that fit me particularly well. They're always way too long, and like they kind of drag and they go underneath my shoes and they get all muddy, and they're just very unpleasant. I've never really cared for them. And because of that, I pretty much always wear running shorts whenever possible. But I really wanted to get something for sun protection above tree line. I totally get that people wear shorts above tree line and lots of people don't have problems, but hey, skin cancer runs in my family and I'd really like to avoid that if at all possible. So I just want to make sure that I'm able to cover up if I'm going to be spending very long days under the sun without any shade. Also, I think that these are going to be awesome for cooler days in the fall when there is a very good chance that I'm actually still going to be on this trip. So about these pants specifically, they fit me, which is really nice. They're jogger style pants, so they're a little bit more of an athletic fit than traditional hiking pants. And overall, I'm just way more comfortable wearing them. Also, I want to point out that these pants are UPF 50 for sun protection. I don't know how much that label actually matters in practice. I think that for the most part, as long as you're wearing clothing, you're at least relatively protected from the sun, but I could be totally wrong on that. Hey, if that's something that you know a lot about, leave a comment down below. And also, the other big selling point here for me was that these things are just stupid comfortable. Seriously, it's like wearing pajamas out in the woods. It's absolutely fantastic. I've actually been wearing them around at home just because I find them so comfy to wear. The fabric is thin and stretchy, so it breathes and it moves really nice, but it's also kind of sturdy, so it still feels durable. I'm not sure if that makes any sense now that I'm hearing it come out of my mouth, but trust me, if you felt it, you would know what I'm talking about. The only real con that I see here, and I wish I had thought about this before I ordered them, although I still really like them and I'm still going to wear them, is that because they are jogger style pants, I may end up with tiny little burn rings around my ankles where the joggers don't quite meet the top of my shoe depending on how I'm standing. Hopefully that doesn't happen and I can always wear gaiters if that becomes an issue. Mosquito. But I'll keep you posted. It beats having my whole leg exposed, I guess. And just for anybody out there who's interested in picking these up, I'm like 140 pounds-ish, and I'm 5'9", and I went with the smalls, and they fit me great. I'll weigh them when I get home, and I'll put that around here somewhere. Speaking of gaiters, up next are these, my Dirty Girl gaiters. I don't think these are anything new to the lightweight backpacking community. If you've been watching lots of YouTube videos, Darwin's been talking about these for like ever. Honestly, I don't know if he uses gaiters anymore, but sorry, this mosquito is just going for it. But anyway, I bought these just to keep stuff out of my shoes when I'm hiking long days. I really only realized that this was a problem recently during training hikes. I've been getting tons of pine needles in my socks, which isn't the end of the world. I can pick them out, but it's just kind of one more thing that I have to deal with. And I've just been trying to kind of streamline my whole day so that I don't have to stop too much while I'm hiking. I looked around at different gaiters, like these ones. I looked at some from Ultra, and these were really the lightest that I could find. I haven't hiked in them yet, but I have tried them on with my hiking shoes, and they seem to fit both my ankle and my shoe really, really well. So I'm excited to give them a shot here shortly. They come in a ton of fun patterns and colors if that's your jam, or if you're like me and you're boring, they also just have plain black. The only real question that I'm left with after buying these and trying them out at home is, are they totally necessary? I'm not really sure. Maybe I just like buying stuff to solve problems that aren't really that big of a problem. So time will tell, I'll let you know. Up next at number 3 is a new pair of hiking shoes, and I went with the Ultra Timp 5s. Typically, I do like a more minimal shoe. I'm a big believer that the feedback that you get from your feet when touching the ground is really important for preventing long-term injury. So in other words, when you have a big, cushy shoe, while it may feel a little bit better on your feet when you're going over rocks and stuff like that, you end up putting a lot more wear on your knees, for instance, just because you're going harder than you would have normally had you not had that big cushioned shoe. That said, I've talked about it on the channel before. I do have some arthritis in my feet. I also have a case of tendinitis, which I'm working through right now, which I got from training. So I did want something that was just a little bit easier on my feet for longer hiking days. But these are pretty much just the trail version of my preferred road running shoe right now, which is the Ultra Tourin 7. The nice thing about these is, just like the other Ultra shoes, they're zero drop, which means that the heel isn't elevated at all, which is nice for me. I'm prone to having really tight calves, and having a shoe where the heel is elevated really only makes that problem worse for me. They also have a wide-ish toe box, which is Ultra's thing. And also, like I mentioned earlier, they just have a nice tall stack height, which is really just the height of the foam or the cushion underneath your foot. In terms of things that I don't love about them at this point, I've got about 30 or 40 miles on them or something like that, is first off, they're definitely not as wide as my Lone Peaks. At least they don't feel like they are. I do like to have lots of room for my toes to move around and to spread out when I'm walking, but because they aren't quite so wide in the toe, I do have to admit that I do feel a little bit more stable on maybe slightly more technical hikes. When I'm working my way down like a really steep hillside or something like that, I don't feel like I'm sliding around quite so much like I did in my Lone Peaks. The other thing being that even though I did buy them for the extra stack height compared to the Lone Peaks, I do feel like they're probably a little bit more tippy. I'm prone to rolling ankles, and I'd really like to not do that on this trip. So while I certainly don't find them like unstable to walk in or anything like that, I do try to be mindful of the fact that I'm a little bit higher off the ground than I normally am. Also, and this one is kind of the biggie, but I've had them for like 30 or 40 miles, like I said, and the toe cap is already starting to peel off. I don't think I'm the first person on the internet to call into question the durability of Ultra shoes at this point, but I was really hoping that I would be able to make it through at least a handful of hikes before they started showing any significant wear. Now, to be fair, where the toe cap is peeling, I don't think it's going to make any difference or affect the performance of the shoe or anything like that. It's just a little bit frustrating for a $150 pair of shoes. Up next at number 4, I think, are my Knockaround Classics. Should I wear them while I talk about them? Everybody can see how cool I look in my new shades. Honestly, they are very comfortable. I love these. I own lots of Knockarounds. Specifically, the Classics are the ones that I typically go with. I have a kind of a smaller head, if I'm being totally honest. A weird thing to say on the internet. But anyway, I find that these ones fit my face the best out of all of the different options. But even though I have like a dozen pairs at this point, I wanted a pair that I could have specifically for backpacking, so I could just leave them in my backpack and not have to worry about forgetting them when I go out on trips. It's just one less thing to think about. But yeah, these things are great. They're pretty cheap as far as I'm concerned. They were $28, but even though they are pretty cheap, they're still polarized, which I consider to be pretty much a must if I'm going to be doing any hiking on snow. Also, the Knockarounds are super customizable. With the Classics in particular, I think that these ones only come in set designs, but they have a ton of different options that you can choose from. But if you choose their other frames, you can go and you can customize like all the different colors and the lenses and the arms and all of that stuff. For those of you that care, maybe you don't care, but I think it's neat. So like I said, I have had great success with Knockarounds over the years. The only real issue that I've noticed that I do want to point out is that I've noticed that my black framed Knockarounds tend to crack. And I think that what happens is that when I'm out in the sun, the black frames will get really, really hot. And I have a tendency to jump into pretty much any body of water that I see. And I think that when I jump in and the frames suddenly get cold, they'll crack. Because I've noticed that I always seem to find that they're cracked after I go into water. So just something to be aware of if you happen to prefer black sunglasses. All right, see you later, cool Tim. Moving on to number 5 are my Z-Packs Virtus rain mitts. Vertice? I don't know, Darwin always says Virtus, but I think in like geometry or whatever, we had vertices. On the off chance that somebody from Z-Packs watches the channel, if you could comment down below on the pronunciation of Virtus or Vertice, I'd greatly appreciate it. The people need to know. Anyway, these things are stupid light and compact. They weigh less than an ounce, and when they showed up at my house, they were actually rolled up smaller than this. I don't even know how they did it, but it was just like a little roll like this big. But still, these are quite tiny. It's really not going to take up much space in my pack at all. I bought these because I'm prone to cold digits, especially when it's wet out, and this is a very minimal weight penalty for some extra insulation. I think that when talking rain gear, something that often comes up is like, yes, it's very light, but will it actually keep you dry? And just so that we're on the same page, unless I'm out in like absolutely frigid temperatures, I really don't expect my rain gear to keep me dry. It's really just there to keep the direct rain off of me and to help keep me a little bit warmer. I fully expect that when I go out in the Pacific Northwest in the fall, I'm gonna show up at camp absolutely soaked all the way down to my skin, and I'm okay with it. The main reason that I went with these specifically, other than the fact that they are just really light, is that while I mentioned that I don't necessarily expect my rain gear to keep me dry, it is nice when it at least keeps me dry for longer, if it's just like a short storm or something like that. And these rain mitts specifically already came seam taped, so I didn't have to do any extra work. I was looking at the event rain mitts from Mountain Laurel Designs, which look like a really nice design, but when last I checked, you had to seam seal those yourself. It's not the end of the world, I just really didn't feel like doing it with all the other things that I have going on right now. There were a bunch of size options on the website when I ordered them, and all I did was just measure my hand, and I was able to get a size that actually fits me really well. You know, sometimes when you get gloves or mittens, they just end up being really ill-fitting and silly looking. I didn't really get that vibe with these. They fit great. Also, they're really long in the wrist, which is nice for layering. I can make sure that my jacket either goes fully over or fully under them so that no rain actually leaks in there. The only real concern that I have with them is just that they're not reinforced in the palm or anything like that, so I don't know how well they're going to hold up to hiking with trekking poles over the long term. That said, that's just kind of the trade-off when you get something that's really light. So I don't consider it a design flaw or anything like that. It's just something that I try to be mindful of and hopefully not wear them out too soon. And finally at number 6, and this is something that I've wanted for a while, is the Kuiu Peloton 97. Jupiter's had one of these things for ages, and I always thought that they looked super comfortable, and I was excited to finally get a chance to pick one up. I got this because I wanted an active layer that was a little bit lighter than my Patagonia R1 hoodie, which I love, but it's kind of overkill for 3-season conditions usually, and I wanted something that could potentially replace my puffy during really warm hikes where I don't need to worry about getting super cold at night. I did try an Alpha Direct hoodie at first. I went with the Farpoint Alpha Cruiser in 90 GSM, and I think that the Alpha Cruiser is a great piece of gear. It was very warm, very comfortable. It just, for me personally, it didn't fit very well. I found that if I went with the small, it was way too tight in the shoulders and it just wasn't particularly comfortable when I was moving my arms around. And then when I sized up to a medium, it was way too big and boxy and I kind of looked like a garden gnome. Also, and this has nothing to do with the Alpha Cruiser specifically, more just Alpha Direct in general, I did snag it within the first 30 minutes of wearing it. I put my hand into my Z-Pack stuff sack, which has Velcro around the opening, and it got caught on the Velcro and pulled a little bit. Now, it wasn't anything wild, it's really just cosmetic, but just because of that experience, it did feel just a little bit more fragile to me than I would like. That said, there are tons of people out there that absolutely love their Alpha Direct gear, so it really just comes down to personal preference. I should mention though, as I took this out of my bag when I was getting set up to actually record this video, this seam actually got caught on the Velcro on my bag and did pull out a pretty good bit. So just something to be aware of if you do pick this up. These seams do snag. But overall, I'm happy with it. It's really light for what you would consider to be like a traditional fleece. It has thumb holes, which I love. I find that it makes layering way easier when you can line everything up at the thumbs. And it's got a nice hoodie with a zip up neck. Oh, gotta put this one up first. But you can zip it up pretty much all the way, like with my R1 hoodie. It doesn't go up quite as far. The R1 will actually go up to like my nose and cover my whole face, kind of balaclava style. But for the kind of conditions that you would expect to use this in, I think that this is great as it just covers up your neck and keeps things nice and warm. I don't think there's really any cons here to speak of other than the snagging that I already talked about. Something to be aware, literally every time. Something to be aware of though is that it is very thin compared to a traditional fleece. That's not necessarily good or bad or anything like that. Just sort of keep it in mind when you order it that you're not going to get something that feels really warm and fluffy. Also, minor point, but if fun colors are your thing, then you should probably look elsewhere because it really just comes in camo, green, and gray and black, which is fine for me. I mean, I personally don't like to stand out when I'm in the woods, but I know that lots of people have different style preferences, so just something to think about. And there you have it, 6 new pieces of gear for summer 2024. Again, there will be more of these videos rolling out as more gear comes in, so keep an eye out for them. And if you're into gear videos, feel free to check out this one over here. And finally, thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me, and I will catch you in the next one.